Hello and welcome here to Best of the West, a National League West podcast here with Blake Street Banner. I am your host, Skylar Timmons, and joining me, performing a legally distinct version of a song he was singing before we recorded, it's Kenneth Weber.
I think that's one where you clarify it as that was something. All right. Yeah. Yeah. That was an attempt was made to be reunited, but it does feel so good.
Indeed, it does. Yeah, it's been a couple weeks, but hey, we're finally back together here after I was sick one week. You had abs tickets the next week, and then other procedures the following week. So we are back in action and appreciate people hopping in here early on. Isaac Stevens, welcome. And Kenneth getting some love for his Expo hat. Hey, will the Rays be sold back to Montreal?
Oh, will the Rays be sold at all?
Yeah.
That's a whole can of worms right now. But if, in generally speaking, sports owners are their own little exclusive clubs, and you only have 29 other peers, and nobody else answers to you. If they don't want you around, and this is true of the NFL, NBA, whatever, like it's a big deal. So it seems like the 29 other owners have kind of shifted on Sternberg over in Tampa. So that's going to be something interesting to watch because they were all right with Oakland's BS, but apparently Tampa's isn't acceptable. So
Yeah, I don't know. But fun stuff. Hey, the Nashville Stars, that little group, released a new logo and whatnot. So
Nashville,
Nashville's heating up.
yeah. North Carolina is a huge hotbed for baseball prospects too. So it would always be fun to have something in Charlotte. But ultimately, I honestly think they want those cities as leverage for stadiums. But that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, and Isaac points out, yeah, there was that little rumor to like split their games between Tampa Bay and Montreal, but then just like the logistics of that, just
Yeah,
nobody
that's
liked the idea.
something. Yeah, it's not feasible. And then that was something that was Sternberg specifically, and that's another reason why the ownership isn't being taken seriously, isn't
Yeah,
respected, whatever, however you want to phrase it. But that came from the ownership, not baseball.
yeah, weird stuff happening, and who knows, expansion will happen sometime.
At least
Utah
they're finally
Baseball
playing in
Club,
Tampa.
yeah,
Yeah, it might be the minor league stadium, but they're finally playing in Tampa now.
yeah, where the Rockies will open the season, so
Yep.
good for them. But we'll hop right into it now, though. Here for Best of the West. And first off, wanted to try out some here, hitting down a couple of headlines, just a quick rundown before we get into our main topic here. But probably the big one, Kenneth, was with the Dodgers as they prep to head out to Tokyo. So they've got to figure out the travel team and who's going to be on the roster. They decide that one of their notable signings of the offseason, Hyseung Kim from the KBO, will not be on the opening day roster as of now, was optioned to AAA along with several others. But he seemed to be penciled in as the opening day second baseman. Doesn't look to be the case now.
Yeah, I'm not terribly surprised at this move, and I think bringing Kike Hernandez back late in the offseason also shows that if anything, the Dodgers love depth. Now they have a lot of star depth, and that's another thing, but they are very good at generating major league depth, and I think that Kim starts off in that depth role, and I think they would have been pleasantly surprised if he exceeded that and took a starting job right away. But it's there's a culture shift and they have the cushion to ease into it. So maybe something is left in the tank for a Kike Hernandez, or maybe they are able to get a little bit more or shift somebody like Tommy Edman over there in the interim. They have options, so they don't need Kim. So it's best for his development to probably start him in the minors. And so it makes a lot of sense when you look at it that way.
Yeah, because your outfield can be Andy Pajes and Teoscar Hernandez and Michael Conforto with whoever else they want to throw out there. So yeah,
Outman might be in the mix.
yeah. So it seems like they want him to go just continue to work on his bat. I think that was the thing. The biggest concern was whether it would translate over. They didn't like what they saw, I guess, in spring training. Like, nah, he probably needs some more seasoning before we fully throw him into the big leagues. And so he'll, as of now, will start the year with AAA Oklahoma City.
Yes, and I don't think they're the Dodgers anymore.
No,
I
they
think
they were
like the
in
baseball
transition.
club, something. That if I remember correctly on the scouting report, the glove was big league ready. There was the question of how does he translate as a hitter, yada yada. So, it so far it fits and kind of matches expectations. I think if you're talking about at 2/3 of the league, and that might be, undercutting it a little bit, he's probably on the big league roster. If you're talking
Yeah.
about 2/3 of the rest of the teams in the league, if not 25 other teams, that's probably the situation. I personally haven't watched a lot of him play, so I can't say for sure, but I wouldn't imagine he's that far away from being a big league contributor. They're
No.
probably just trying to put him in a position to succeed. That's
Yeah.
all.
Most definitely, because they traded away Gavin Lux and everything, so it kind of left open a wide open hole there at second base, and I'm sure they're hoping Kim can fill that in. And hey, like you're saying, they have the depth to do it. They
And they
they
have
can,
time with Kim
yeah,
too.
they can afford that.
Yep. And this is one of those things where it's a very first world problem. And honestly, I
Yeah,
don't think there are too many teams out there who the guy that they wanted to be their 8-hole hitter starting second baseman isn't quite there yet, and that's
yeah,
their biggest problem. Like, that's the Dodgers. So it'll come around. They have time, they have depth. And if a guy like Kike isn't cutting it, come June, then he might be out and Kim immediately gets slotted in there. It's not hard to see that possibility.
yeah. But so he's been optioned to AAA. One other thing here with the Dodgers, sounds like Dustin May is going to snag that fifth starter spot because Tony
Mhm.
Gonsolin's probably going to start on the injured list. Also, Bobby Miller, I believe, was optioned. Same time Kim was, and then Michael Grove undergoes season-ending surgery on his shoulder, so he's out for the year. So there goes another guy in their swath of depth.
Yeah, you're okay losing the name Michael Grove over some other names.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a rash of pitching injuries that went down in baseball over the past week or two. So, I mean, the Dodgers are probably going to have that six-man rotation, and we've talked about it a couple of times on this podcast where they're going to come and go. Some of those, a lot of those pieces in that six-man rotation.
Yeah,
So Bobby Miller really underperformed last year. So I think that it's get healthy and get right. And so him starting in AAA is no surprise. But if you have Sasaki, let's say where they want to slow him down, Bobby Miller is probably one of, if not the first guy that comes back into the rotation in my mind for LA. So again, it's just one of those things that you saw the plan. It was pretty transparent in the offseason, and now you're just starting to see some of the pieces move around. I think the most important thing probably is Dustin May is a very encouraging development because
yeah,
this guy has kind of been like a Jacob DeGrom diet version, where it's like, I swear, if he's healthy, it's going to be electric and it's going to be front of the rotation stuff. He just can't ever stay on the field. So that's a big piece for the Dodgers that I think a lot of people have forgotten about with so many other moves over the past, couple of years with them.
yeah. No, and with a lot of things, it's like so many teams just shotgun blast pulling in minor league contracts, build up depth because the dominoes just start falling. And so Dodgers depth already being tested, and we'll see how it works out for him with that rotation. But speaking of rotations, really quickly with the Padres, sounded like Michael King and Dylan Cease unlikely to be moved and will be on that roster come opening day, which was one of the big questions all through the offseason and here in spring training. Would the Padres try to move these guys to start the season? Doesn't look like it.
One of the headlines that I saw one of the descriptions that I saw for the asking price for Dylan Cease was an upgrade in the rotation, and nobody is acquiring Dylan Cease to downgrade. It's like
Yeah,
I think they held too high of a premium, where it was just probably never realistic that any teams were going to match the price that the Padres had on King and Cease. And that's not to say they're wrong for doing it that way. It's just that they had to be blown away because of the state of their franchise. They're really, and we keep talking about it, but it's very do or die for the Padres. And it feels like maybe even this year, because a lot of that minor league depth that should be the talent that makes up the depth of this major league team was traded in the past couple of seasons. So there's nothing behind it. So they may be in their last year with their two best pitchers with nobody behind them to replace them. And that's kind of a scary proposition, which is why they needed to hold that King's ransom price for those guys.
yeah, yeah. But hey, we'll see as the season goes on. I'm sure that that price will maybe lower and lower
Is
It's
that yeah.
it's perfectly fine to keep it high at this point in the season, but then as it goes and determine how things pan out for them, that's when that price maybe should start lowering a bit.
Yeah,
Just
you
depending on
think
where the
just because
Padres are at.
yeah, it's less amount of time that you would have a King or a Cease on your squad, but really, if the Padres are within any shouting distance of a playoff spot, they should be going for it.
Yeah,
I think the wheels really have to fall off. They have to be, hanging out with the Rockies with the in the basement with the lights off for it to come around. So I think they could go all the way to the trade deadline, where that's where 2 weeks or a road series matters, where a team might be on the fence and then they're approaching kind of that end of July into August. Okay, and then they lose 7 out of 8 on a road stand, and it's like that's it. We're selling it all. So it's going to be interesting to see the Padres come July and where they're sitting at that time.
yeah, most definitely. But hey, it's typical. You know, Yankees had some injuries, and so everybody's open season.
Some injuries,
Everybody has to help with. Everybody has to trade to the Yankees to help them out. But
yeah. The so the Yankees lost the one guy they couldn't lose, basically, on
yeah,
the pitching side, and that's what makes the Dodgers that much more impressive. If this headline was Tyler Glasnow goes down with Tommy John surgery, usually that sinks a team's hopes, especially a World Series team. The Dodgers could weather that storm. The
mm-hmm.
Yankees can't weather losing Garrett Cole.
Yeah,
They can't the same way, which is why all that trade speculation is so rampant. That and it's the Yankees.
yeah.
Everybody knows that.
But yeah, but moving on, one last little headline I wanted to touch on here. This one I thought was pretty interesting. The San Francisco Giants affiliate, San Jose, which I believe is the low A affiliate, uh, they will face the Oakland Ballers of the Independent Pioneer League, which is an MLB partner league. They're going to face each other in an exhibition on April 2nd to keep the spirit of the Battle of the Bay alive. They're calling it Battle of the Bay 2.0. Since Oakland's no longer there, the
Yeah.
Athletics have moved. So these two little affiliates, I think this is the first time a professional affiliate is facing an independent team in any sort of play. This is from an
Maybe.
article I was reading it,
Yeah.
but they will they're facing off, which I thought was pretty cool. Oakland Ballers they're an interesting one out there in the Pioneer League.
That's yeah, it's fun in some regard. I don't know. For maybe it's the pessimist in me that feels like there's a little bit of a slap in the face with this too, because one of the big things with Oakland for the longest time in their search for a new stadium was the possibility of San Jose,
Mm-hmm.
and San Francisco forever has owned the rights to San Jose to use it for their AAA team, and they've always said it's never a possibility. So now you can watch the team play in the place you were never allowed to go to
Mm-hmm.
in an exhibition in honor of you leaving. Is that the event, as I
Yeah,
understand it? So, like, there is that part of it too. So, but
yeah,
hey, Oakland Ballers, that's a fun name.
yeah. The Battle of the Bay 2.0 at its core is a celebration of the Bay Area baseball fan and the history of baseball in this region, says the San Jose Giants president Ben Taylor, providing fans the opportunity to enjoy this first of its kind matchup while giving young developing players the chance to play in front of an energized, excite ballpark crowd. Is going to be an unforgettable experience. It is my sincere hope that alongside the Ballers, this is the beginning of a new annual baseball tradition of our and the history that is being made. It'll be the first time an affiliated franchise takes on an MLB partner league team. So that's the historical part of it with the
I just
Oakland
hope,
Ballers.
yeah, I just hope this doesn't have the same betting line as like a Harlem Globetrotters and Generals matchup. If
Yeah.
this becomes an annual 31-2 drumming,
Hey, the Oakland Ballers weren't too bad last year in their. I think they reached the playoffs. I think that was their first full season. No, that was their second full season.
I would have to look that up, and I'm
But
not
yeah,
doing that right now.
but yeah, I just thought that was something fun that's happening in the world of
That
baseball
is fun.
related to the Giants. But yeah, Oakland Ballers, they had tried to play a game at the Coliseum. Like they'd had everything scheduled, a
Mhm.
deposit down, and then the Athletics pulled a clause in their contract that says, no, we don't want that to happen. So
I think they
that got
probably
nixed.
realized that'd make them look bad.
Yeah.
I think there was somebody finally in PR was just like, whoa, 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 whoa. You sure about this?
We can't let the bees play there.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
happens if they have more fun than when we play here?
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
But there's some quick headlines around the league. But that moves us into our main topic here tonight. Talking about front office and manager hot seats. Coming into 2025, the NL West, and this is a question usually around all of baseball, but I always think about managers and GMs, other people in charge of these teams, who could be on the hot seat in 2025. And okay, just looking at the National League West, for the most part, I would say as we will go down these, my first impressions or my first thoughts is that there aren't many hot seats happening in the National League West coming into this season, just from what it seems like. Or at least maybe some lukewarm ones, but nothing that's like hot, hot, hot to me, maybe. But
Yeah,
we'll get
I
into
would
it.
I'd say one team stands out like a sore thumb, and that's San Diego. And it maybe isn't necessarily Mike Schilt, which when it comes to contract extensions or votes of confidence, you always take those with a grain of salt. So I do believe that Schilt was the kind of right guy at the right time for this organization. I think the team has really rallied and become a better team and gotten over a hump with him.
Mm.
So I'm fairly, safe in feeling about Schilt, but he could just be the fall guy. I think really AJ Preller, the GM, is the one who feels like he's on the hottest seat out of anybody in this whole division in any coach or front office role, just because it's been such a long time and such a big saga of big ads, big pieces, slam Diego. The Padres have changed as an organization dramatically in the past 5 years, and Preller has been there for all of it. But there hasn't been a ton of winning as part of that. They're not White Sox where it's a failed promise and went the complete wrong way and crashed and burned. But yeah, if they don't do much this year, we just talked about them possibly being sellers. If they're sellers at the deadline, I have a hard time seeing AJ Preller starting 2026 with them. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. And let's start here with the Padres. So, manager Mike Schilt came in within these last couple of years. I always forget. It's like 2023 started, right? After
Yeah,
Bob
I
Melvin.
believe
Yeah,
so.
Bob Melvin goes over to the Giants. So,
Mhm.
he takes over in 23. Just back in November, they signed him to a 2-year extension through 2026, I believe. So they signed him to this contract, and like you said, he's been a guy that's kind of had to be the right man for the right job, and kind of temper that clubhouse, wrangle them in, maybe shield them from the drama behind the scenes with the ownership group and everything. And so he's got that reputation of a decent manager that players like, and that has done well for that team. But they said I think it hinges then on AJ Preller as president of baseball ops and the GM. He's got that dual role. I think that's where that hot seat would be there in San Diego, like you're saying, because AJ Preller, he's taken a lot of big swings. Some of them have worked, but he hasn't. None of them have really felt like home runs that have pushed him over the top. There's
Mhm.
been a lot of wheeling dealing. He's a good batting average. He's hitting a lot of doubles. He hits those gaps, but sometimes it's an empty batting average, and maybe not all the hits are just contributing to anything. And so there's just been a lot of wheeling and dealing that's
Yeah.
reshaped the
And
team, like you're saying.
empty calories is what I would always
Yeah.
call those. But yeah, it's almost reverse of how I feel like it would naturally be. Sometimes it's you have the front office, you have the general manager that puts all the pieces in place. They're starting to get better, but they can't get over the hump of being a successful team. And then the manager gets moved to make a move to mix things up. I feel like that's almost where they would be, but with the general manager side, just because the Juan Soto trade is one of the five biggest trades in baseball history.
Mm.
It was massive, and they survived getting Soto and having to lose Soto because he wasn't going to sign in free agency, and still came out okay as a playoff team in back-to-back years with and without. So I think that that's a testament to Preller and Schilt, but just they've kind of run the piggy bank dry,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
with everything that they've traded away. And so they also have new management in place. There was an old or new ownership in place. And so who knows what changes come in the state of the franchise and the direction of the franchise moving forward, because they could come out and win the World Series this year and have the manager of the year and executive of the year, and maybe we have a tyrannical new ownership structure in place. They start gutting it Marlin style. Probably
Mhm.
won't happen, but we never know. That could be the case. So there's a lot up in the air with San Diego this year, and that's what makes you think that the most jobs are on the line in 2025 there.
Yeah, because it's the time's running out, and when you've got the Dodgers who continually to just stack up year after year and looking more insurmountable, and you got the other teams, Giants and Diamondbacks, trying to make moves to crawl back up. That window's closing on the Padres, and add in all the stuff behind the scenes with the Seidler family. It's hard with the payroll crunch and everything in between. At some point, something has to change, and unfortunately, a guy like AJ Preller may find himself out of the job, may find his seat getting a little warm underneath him.
Yeah, and as Astro points out with some of the contracts that are out there, you can look at the Xander Bogaerts deal. That's one that's definitely backfired on him, and that's one where the bills are going to start coming due for them a little bit. And that's what put somebody like a Michael King or a Dylan Cease in a precarious contract situation. Is they can only, there's not the infinite wealth, and they have not bad money, but money they would prefer to allocate elsewhere, and they haven't been able to move that around. So again, this has just been a very aggressive franchise over the past couple of years, and the bill is finally coming due. I think for this is emulating a formula of teams like the Astros and the Cubs, where they kind of skirted it and traded guys off along the way. The Padres haven't been able to do that, also because they haven't won the same way that those other
Mm-hmm.
teams have. So, you know what? If they win a championship this year, then it was all worth it. But if they don't, this is going to be kind of one of those Detroit Tigers 2010s strings where it's like that was a good 5-6 year run.
Yeah,
But now it's falling apart in front of our eyes.
yeah. And with John Seiler being the control person voted on by the owners, perhaps there is no change with ownership, and they do just restructuring, try to keep things as they get settled. Thing, but they still have the lawsuits with the wife and
Yeah,
all the things. So who
what I would
knows?
yeah, what I would say to that is look at the Detroit Tigers after Mr. I died.
Yeah.
There was that we I just used them as an example, but it's a very similar situation where Mike Ilitch with the Detroit Tigers was going out and paying Miggy Cabrera and Justin Verlander. They had that epic four Cy Young rotation, added Prince Fielder, Ian Kinsler, Justin Upton, all this money spent. They didn't get over the hump, but as soon as that ownership, that voice left, the whole attitude and the whole direction
Mm-hmm.
changed. And they're just now coming out of that rebuild. This is their first time being a relevant franchise in 2024 since those days. So, we do have some precedent. We do have some context to point to it. And it's not hard to imagine it going the same way in San Diego.
Yeah. So, and I think a lot of that is what then hinges on some of these other seats for an AJ Preller, because then if AJ Preller goes, then a new GM, president of baseball ops, comes in. They usually want to install their own guys most of the
Hmm.
time. So then Schilt could find himself out of a job. So probably this season it does come down to Preller's. Maybe seat just getting a little warm. Maybe not necessarily really hot, but starting to warm up the buns a little.
If they're hanging out with the Rockies, it's going to get really hot.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that much. Like this is that. So I had this thought come to mind when we were talking earlier about the Rays. Where would you put the Rays if they were in the West right now?
Hmm.
Right? It probably second or third team. They're
Yeah,
kind of right there with
middle of the
Arizona, right
pack.
in there with San Diego. If San Diego finishes behind in Arizona and San Francisco and is calling for the playoffs, then they should choose to add. But this is a team that's kind of right in the mix with everybody else. They're not a very
Yeah.
clear playoff team, but they have plenty of reason to believe to be a playoff team. You can say that about a lot of teams out there. Will they be better than what the East has to offer with everybody except for the Nationals and Marlins? Maybe the Nationals and Marlins. So they don't have a lot of wiggle room to add to bolster this team. Pretty much what you see is what you get. That's why your DH right now is just a hodgepodge of whatever's left in the cupboard.
Yeah.
And they their chips are all in and their hand is forced because they don't have any money. They don't have any prospects to add to the group that they have right now. So it's on the players to go out and do it. And if the players can't go out and do it, then and if it turns out to be a real bad season and they're sitting 20 games below it the All-Star break, we could see firings happen then. Like I
Yeah,
do believe the pendulum can swing that dramatically with this franchise right now.
yeah, yeah. It's just like, all right, well, let's start cleaning house and figure out this organization moving forward in a
Yeah.
new regime or new era
Yeah.
type of
It's a
thing.
it's a
But
weird time for San Diego, man.
yeah, yeah. Good luck to them. But
Still a playoff team,
yeah,
caliber team. So
yeah,
like, but this could be the beginning of the end for Slam Diego and the fun times for that organization right now.
yeah, most definitely. But moving on from the Padres here, let's move over to the Dodgers, who are the main counterpart. They're in the National League West. Uh, kind of spurning this whole conversation was the fact that manager Dave Roberts signed a 4-year extension worth $32.4 million, reportedly. And adding on to this was his final year of his previous extension, of his previous 3-year extension. Uh, Overall, the value is record breaking and beats uh, over in Chicago. And hopefully my internet didn't bug out there for a second. Everybody heard me, but
We did bug out pretty hard there. Sorry.
yeah. Yeah, Dave Roberts signing that 4-year, $32.4 million extension with with the Dodgers to stick around. Pretty much a record breaking contract. Takes over Craig Counsell's record with the Cubs because he was in the final year of his extension. But overall in value, Dave Roberts, stick around. Does Dave Roberts have the safest job in baseball right now?
You'd think. I mean, that's the defending World Series champion, who's now won 2 rings with his team and been to the World Series 4 separate times. Yeah, that's he gets to leave when he wants to leave is the feeling. But it wasn't too long ago that you really questioned Dave Roberts as being kind of an over manager, as being somebody that
Mm-hmm.
was holding Los Angeles back. It's again just you preach and you envy the Dodgers so much every single time you talk about them. But this just goes to show that there's such a well run organization, such a fluid operation that the manager has always fit there. He needed to have the success, and that started with the championship in 2020. And he got over that hill. I think that was the job security that he needed to stay in that position. Now he has 2 rings, and that's kind of a lifelong contract feeling kind of thing that is being set up with Roberts and the Dodgers. So it's the makings of one of the best managerial careers, I think, in Major League history, and we're going to underappreciate it in the moment. I'm having that feeling with this or with Dave Roberts and the Dodgers in that conversation.
Yeah. And no, this is what brings up, I think 2024 carries a lot of weight of winning that World Series there. As
Mm.
Call Me Astros point out here, how disappointing 2022 and 23 were, I would say there's pressure on him, but that may have to do with just how big the team is. And yeah, there's a different sort of hot seat. It's the pressure of continuing the success team. But you said there was those years where managerial decisions in the postseason, and the Dodgers just unable to do it, still with some of the best teams in baseball. Eh, I think winning that World Series in 2024 nets him this contract a little bit, or makes it a little more easier and likely that they're like, okay, yeah, we're going to just keep him around because they could have
Yeah.
had an easy out if they get knocked out again, by the Padres last year in the playoffs. Maybe we enter 2024 or 2025, and it's okay. Well, we'll take these discussions for an extension until the end of the year and see where we're at, type of thing. But right now, it's a different kind of pressure, not so much the hot seat, but we've got you all these tools. Let's keep it rolling. Let's build a dynasty here.
Yeah, it's a different standard,
Yeah.
is really what it is. I think the seat has never been hotter for Dave Roberts than it was after 2019.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this team needed to have a championship. It was all about getting Kershaw his ring, and that this group had to succeed, and they've done so since then. I think it's fair to say it's the quality of a postseason loss is one thing that will determine Dave Roberts' future with the organization. I think 2023 was very rough, but I also think that the Dodgers have run into starting rotation issues in the postseason consecutive years now.
Yeah.
And they clearly took that to heart and have added all of the starting pitching. So it's also there is some justification for those exits that were out of Robert's hands a little bit. So I think some of those safeguards are off. So
Mhm.
if they fall flat on their face and they are bounced in 3 or 4 games in the first round, and they are not very competitive, then yeah, I think it starts getting hot for Roberts. But I really don't see anything that could cause the Dodgers and Roberts to part after this season. Like it
Yeah.
would something catastrophic or obviously health related
Yeah.
for that to be the case.
Yeah. And I always just wonder if like the manager seat in Los Angeles, especially nowadays, with how well run the team is, does it really how much of an impact does like the different kind of manager have? I always think about that. Like if you took no, you took Bud Black from the Rockies, plugged him into the Dodgers, you know, into the Dodgers system, how much would that change the
Sure.
organization as a whole? You can't help but think about that with just how well the team is. Like to a point where how much impact does the manager have? And obviously, Dave Roberts is well loved by the players and has a lot of good influence there. But
hmm
you can't help but wonder about that.
And the environment in which he's the manager, I think, is also something that has to be a consideration.
Mm-hmm.
You there's a lot of attention on LA. There's a lot of attention on a New York Yankees manager, on an Aaron Boone kind of thing as well. So it takes a lot to handle the criticism and the scrutiny that comes with
Yeah.
it. And Roberts again was grilled hard, especially for his bullpen management in the postseason. But now we're still talking about Dave Roberts, two-time World Series champion.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what earns you the benefit of the doubt and trusting that Roberts is in a pretty safe spot because he's already weathered a few storms with this organization, and they're doing just fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's always something fun to think about. But like Norm's pointing out, yeah, Roberts is still prone to maddening bullpen decisions. Don't want to leave past season made every right call. He's historically made some squirrely in game decisions. And hey,
Yep,
that's every manager.
and that's true. And but the same way that it's a well-oiled machine, it takes somebody to make that happen. There's a lot of cliches that get thrown around, but like Dusty Baker was a prime example of someone who could make some really boneheaded and questionable moves as a manager, but was always advocated and hired to take on championship caliber teams because of his ability to handle superstars and handle a clubhouse and yada 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 yada. So I think Dave Roberts has a lot of those intangibles that also compensate for some of those missteps that he makes along the way. And the Dodgers are smart enough to put people around him to help minimize those mistakes over time too. So
Yeah.
that is also in there.
And that's a perfect transition to the other guy here with the Dodgers, with their president of baseball operations, main man in charge of everything, putting together all these deals, Andrew Friedman. Uh, that seat for him is likely ice cold, Kenneth. With everything he's been able to do, he's wearing probably some snowboarding pants because of
Yeah.
how cold that chair is.
He doesn't have a hot seat. He has a nice throne.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the best executive. That seems to be he's the Theo Epstein of this current generation of
hmm
executives, and of that level where he's the gold standard, but also now with the infinite resources of Los Angeles, and he uses them properly, and that's the hive mind. That's the nucleus of the Los Angeles Dodgers is Andrew Friedman and his team, and it works from the top down. So
hmm
it obviously as much job security as he wants because he's put together the best team in baseball and the model franchise. What I start worried about with the Dodgers is when do some pieces start leaving to take on head roles elsewhere.
Yeah.
One thing with LA, Mark Pryor has been there forever as a pitching coach. For me personally, he was one of the best pitchers I've ever seen and has also gotten a lot out of a ton of either both prospect pitchers and veteran pitchers in LA. So I think someone that when the time comes, maybe a San Diego tears it all down. Someone like Pryor could start becoming an attractive candidate for a managerial hire. And same thing with some of their front office people.
hmm Yeah, and they because Dodgers have brought people over, but when you get all these guys, eventually you have to move guys off, and they move on to other opportunities, and just change the scenery for different jobs and different opportunities and whatnot. So Friedman has had so much success since coming over in 2014, and right in the midst of the Dodgers really kicking off year after year after year, winning the division
Hmm.
and just becoming the juggernaut they are now, even more so. He's played a big part of that coming over as the president of baseball ops, coming over from Tampa Bay where he had a lot of success, built them up, and then comes over to the Dodgers, and he's firmly secured himself with this team to where he has he's basically playing he's playing GM like you would in MLB The Show, with budget turned off and you know
Yeah.
having all the fun just going out and getting whoever you want to build your super team.
Easy trades and everything. Yeah, it's and what's funny now, the only threat I could see of Andrew Friedman leaving the Dodgers is the same way that Theo Epstein left his major league role with the Cubs and before that the Red Sox, which is to join the actual corporate office of Major League Baseball.
Mm-hmm.
Ever there's a candidate currently in anybody's front office, it's probably Andrew Friedman. So he's making it look easy. And I think that it, again, I just am a firm believer that it really all starts with him. And when we talk about the importance and the emphasis of the president of baseball operations and that role specifically, look at the Dodgers because I think it starts with that and works its way down. And we'll talk about the Rockies. The Rockies kind of truly don't have that. They have presidents, but it's not really for baseball purposes, and they're a mess. And so it shows with Friedman, just how important having that voice in the room is. And I think that the Dodgers are the envy of everybody because of him.
Yeah, yeah, and nothing right now would put him on that hot seat. But like, yeah, there's other contracts like Norm's pointing out here, 90% success rate for him. But no, that 10% check out the Trevor Bauer contract. Chris Taylor, his contract really hasn't aged that well. Will Smith contract, that was a big one. That who knows, maybe that one doesn't age as well. So
Mhm.
nobody's perfect, but he's got that long track record. And with all these deferrals and the weird contracts and everything, you wonder if sometime those will come due when the bill
Sure.
comes due on those. But nothing, I think, that's putting him on the hot seat anytime soon here with the Dodgers.
Yeah, and I'll defend. We never know who is the final say on adding a player or who has the
Yeah.
final yes and no. And I wouldn't be surprised, given that Chris Taylor is a fan favorite and given Trevor Bauer's celebrityism, or at his time at least, if those were big motivating reasons from ownership to sign players like that. Some,
Mm-hmm.
because owners get involved in free agency, I think more than people realize or assume, and
It's
especially
their
with
money.
specific players. Yeah. So who's to say if it is or is not Friedman's, or any of these GMs on being right or being wrong? But overall, the Dodgers are awesome, and I think eventually teams are going to start paying up to start picking some pieces from
Yeah.
this management structure.
Yeah, like you had mentioned, Brandon Gomes, their general manager, he can go off and have more of a leading role somewhere else that he doesn't have with the Dodgers. So,
Yeah. He can
but
be the Friedman over in Chicago for the
yeah,
White Sox.
plenty of opportunities there. But Dodgers, everybody's pretty much safe there for the most part. Probably for all of it. But moving along here, man, we've spent a long time already talking about a couple of these teams. We're too winded. We haven't been together forever, Kenneth, so now we're talking too much.
It was our little Southern California tour there.
Yeah.
A nice half-hour vacay.
But I will move over to the Giants real quick. They're one pretty fresh here with new president of baseball ops, Buster Posey, and Zach Manazian, their general manager. They're pretty brand new, so they probably have pretty long leashes of what they're doing there. Uh, Bob Melvin's going to be the interesting one because when he had initially signed, it was a 3-year contract, or at least that's the way they build it. But it turns out it was actually guaranteed through 2025, and then there's a team option for 2026 essentially. So 2025 could be Bob Melvin's final year as a Giant, at least for now, as we enter into the season, and then we'll see what happens with the option and everything. If Buster Posey maybe then wants to go a different direction, but I think Bob Melvin, that would be the one. If there is a hot seat there in San Francisco, it would be for Bob Melvin, but even then, kind of lukewarm.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of get a feel for Bob Melvin, just because San Francisco's in so much flux, and especially this conversion with Buster Posey into that baseball present operations. I think there's a lot of inventory being taken with this team this year, and how they respond to Melvin, how happy they are with the development of some of the young guys under Melvin. All of that, I think, is being assessed and evaluated this year. And so, if they're not happy, if they want to move on, it's very easy to see that Melvin could move on just as a change of voice. And then to that point, it's also just kind of par for the course for him being in his managerial career, just on the doorstep of a team, kind of going over the hill or being
Yeah.
successful. In Arizona, in San Diego, before his time in San Francisco, he was with Oakland for a long, long time, and their ups and downs, but never really achieved a whole lot with him. And so it would be a bummer because I think Bob Melvin's a very good manager, and I think he's been getting a
Mm-hmm.
lot of jobs continuously for a reason. But I think if it's just not working out in San Francisco for a couple of years, but it was never really that bad, that kind of defines his whole managerial career.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just thinking of this. Bruce Bochy's contract with the Rangers runs through this season.
How wild would that be?
Yeah, and an article back in February 16th, he shows no signs of wanting to hang it up again. And he's 69. He's the second oldest manager in the big leagues. What if Posey brings back his old manager to manage the team in 2026?
I, you know, I wouldn't actually, the more I think about it, be as surprised. Just because, let's say Farhad Zaidi was the problem, basically, and kind of
Mm-hmm.
forced Bochy out. And now that he's out of the equation, everything's hunky dory. What it's not apples to apples here, but when Ozzie Smith left the Cardinals and retired, he was pretty adamant that he wouldn't be around again until Tony La Russa never was there. And so maybe that's kind of the situation, to be honest, with San Francisco. And if Bochy wanted to run it back now, if I'm Texas, I'm kicking and screaming and not letting that happen.
Yeah.
But maybe, yeah, maybe. I'll give credence to that thought.
Yo, man, that'll be a wild thing, but
Full circle. They're bringing back the watermelon for another championship dynasty. That dude's got an enormous head. If you don't know, I think he wears a size 8. It's like it might be the biggest hat in baseball history. Bruce Bochy. So
oh
just
man,
for if you learn anything from this episode, that's your takeaway.
Bruce Bochy has a gigantic melon.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep. That's
yeah,
going to be the title of the next episode.
yeah, Bruce Bochy's giant melon. Yeah, but in San Francisco, because it's such a new regime with Buster Posey being over, they're figuring
Mhm.
things out, and they're in that transition period of just trying to rebuild back up, retooling, as some teams like to call it. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do with Bob Melvin after this season, because Zaidi was also one that was guaranteed through 25 with the option for 26. Now it's just Bob Melvin, and that's the language in the contract. But we'll see what happens there. Not a whole lot there to the Giants. There, everybody's pretty safe there. Uh,
One thing I want to throw out there, and so let's say Bob Melvin doesn't work out. Their one of their coaches, who could feasibly become a big league manager this season, would be hitting coach Pat the Vat Burrell is the hitting coach in San Francisco. So when we talk about coaches, San Francisco's hitting and the attention on their offense with the addition of Willie Adames, I think, is going to be a thing this year, and they want to continue to see improvement. So, one, Burrow could be on the hot seat. I don't think he's
mhm.
been with the organization long. This would probably be his first year. But if Bob Melvin isn't happening, when we see more and more recently retired players go straight to managing, maybe Pat Burrell's that guy. Just something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, yeah. Who knows?
Matt
Um,
Williams is the third base coach. former major league manager with the Washington Nationals. So like they have some guys behind Melvin who could theoretically jump in there. So,
Yeah.
but it's an inventory year. If the Giants are, a couple games below 500 and on pace to be like, a 78 win team this year, how much are you putting that on Bob Melvin, good
Mm-hmm.
or bad? That's just kind of what this team is.
Yeah. I don't know, but Giants they're an interesting team, interesting spot where they're in right now because they're not rebuilding, but it's just that retooling to try to build themselves back up. Uh, but
Let's get to Norm's question here too. So, Norm asked, "Does a pending new CBA and potential changes that can impact how teams can build rosters? Will teams wait and kind of wait for the CBA basically to play out? Um, I think with player contracts, mostly yes, but with management, mostly no. I think they would want to get all their ducks in a row and have their regimes in place." And then wait on the player side with the CBA because the CBA is ultimately between teams and players. So they can still make front office moves during a CBA freeze. They can still sign coaches, hire fire managers, whatever. It's just interaction with players are gone. So I think that's mostly what goes into it. But I don't think any teams are really looking at the CBA right now, other than contract extensions for young guys.
yeah.
That's my 2 cents, though. What about
Well,
you,
yeah.
Skyler?
Well, yeah. Usually, you'll see teams like saying they want to get the top brass, get their ducks in a row with the guys at the top, and plug them in and make sure they have stability in the leadership because
Mm-hmm.
you need somebody to lead the team because then you can construct the team, but you need somebody to be at the head of it first before you start maybe trying to add more and more guys. But so I think because the CBA December 1st, 2026 is when the current one expires. I don't know why December 1st, so weird, but
I think that's just it's a rolling
yeah,
thing for how long they've been doing it. It's just the end of calendar years. It's
it's
May.
yeah,
It's not during the season,
yeah. It's such a weird spot sometimes though, but
Yeah.
yeah, they want to. Everybody wants to get their leadership in place.
Yeah. The CBA is looming. I think it's in the back of everybody's minds. No decisions are being affected by the CBA right now. It's still too far away.
Yeah, everybody will play friendly now until midnight
Oh,
on
Benham. Yeah.
December 1st, and then gloves come off.
Oh yeah. And Dick Monfort says something stupid and gets kicked out of the meeting.
Yeah. But moving on here, next one we'll head out to the desert. We'll save our Rockies for last, like usual. But the
Mm.
Diamondbacks also in that same area. I'd put them in the Dodgers area a little bit, in the sense of just the leadership as a team. General manager Mike Hazen, he was signed at the end of the 2023 season. He signed an extension taking him through 2028 as the general manager with a 2029 option. And same with manager Torey Lovello. He received a 2-year extension at the end of 2023 that'll take him through the 2026 season. He had signed an extension at the beginning of that year. So that World Series with appearance for the Diamondbacks really carried some weight, and they're like, yeah, we got to keep this train rolling with these fellas.
Yeah, I'll say with Hazen first, just from everything that I've read, he is one of the most respected GMs, I think, in the sport right now, with what he's done with Arizona as a franchise, and also just,
Mm-hmm.
him knowing some of his personal story. And so I think that, and then with Lavello, this is somebody, he's been the manager there since 2017.
Yeah.
It's not like Torey Lavello is new there. And then they had a 93 win season his first year there. So I think that to a lesser degree, the same way we talked about Dave Roberts in 2019, kind of clearing a lot of questions and easing the pressure he was under. That's definitely the case with Lavello and Arizona in 2023. But I think that if this team really struggles in the first half again. This is what held them
Mm-hmm.
back last year from making the playoffs, and that's barely, what almost held them from getting the playoffs at all the year they went to the World Series. That needs to be fixed. Like that's just the way it is with Arizona for them to be a surefire playoff team. And if it doesn't, I mean, it's the cliche. You change the manager because a move has to be made to get this team winning again, and so that's the danger that Lavello's in. So you think that being less than 2 years from a World Series would keep you safe, but I don't know. There's high expectations right now in Arizona. You don't go out and sign Corbin Burns to win 2 years, 3 years from now. You sign Corbin Burns to win now. And so if they sputter, Lavello would be the scapegoat for it.
Yeah, because it feels like with Arizona, there's not a ton of pressure. Like Astros pointing out here, asking what's the pressure in Arizona? Because yeah, they've got a good window, they've got the good talent. I think that's where it comes into is the pressure comes from not continuing to develop and get up to that competitive level because they were way ahead of schedule of making that World Series. And so now the window opened maybe a little quicker than they expected. So they're rushing to get all these pieces together to build that consistently competitive product. That's where maybe you can see some of that pressure for Lovello coming into this season and carrying forward. It would have to be a catastrophic just collapse with everything. Corbin Carroll does terrible. A lot of the other young guys just are not hitting and everything. Nothing's working for the team. Pitching's bad. I think a lot of things would have to go wrong to fully put Lovello in the hot seat. But
Maybe. I don't know. I think a lot of it depends on what is success to the Arizona Diamondbacks right now.
mm-hmm,
Is success contending for a playoff spot? Because if that's the case, then Lavello has a pretty low bar to clear, and I think he has a lot of job security. Is the goal to make the playoffs? Pretty much the same, but I think that's where the catastrophic outcome has to come into play. Is the expectation and is the goal to win a World Series in Arizona this year? And if that's the case, and they get knocked out in 3 games by Philadelphia in the first round, and they don't even look like they belong on the same field, maybe then, yeah, so it really just depends on what Arizona's expectations are. And
yeah,
if they feel like they have a great regular season and then they get waxed in the playoffs, maybe they're saying, you know what, Tori, we just have a higher goal and we don't think you're going to get us there. Like that,
mm-hmm,
that could be it. I don't think Arizona is going to be that steal with their direction, but maybe, and maybe there is that shift going on with Arizona, not only with their players entering their prime, but also management and their expectations of this group too.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Saying it would just have to be, I think, something just absolutely drastic for Lovello, but we'll get to a point and maybe there's just some really clearly bad managerial decisions in those critical
Mhm.
moments in a postseason. Those are the
It'd
types
be
of things that can
very
get you fired.
Yeah, it'd be very surprising though. Like Lavello and Hazen have done such a good job with
Yeah.
Arizona to get them to this point, and a lot of it is a homegrown product with some ancillary pieces. I think they really deserve a lot of benefit of the doubt right now, because look at what Arizona's been the past couple of years. But again, that first half is very important for Arizona right now. If they get off to a bad start, that's been a problem for them for the past couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah. So Arizona's interesting, but it would be like, well, maybe like their hitting coach. If something goes terribly wrong there, he could be on
Maybe,
the hot seat. But they
yeah,
just barely got a new pitching coach. So, he just has that pressure of helping this unit in his first year and
yeah.
helping some of these veterans and whatnot.
With any of these teams, it's very true where you could have a very lopsided, oh, the hitting is terrific, but good Lord, the pitching is awful right now. Yeah, the,
Mm-hmm.
the pitching coach becomes the scapegoat in those situations too. I don't think you look at any one pitching staff or batting order and say, "Oof," I think this is going to be a problem kind of thing. But like that's why I brought up Pat Burrell. Maybe San Francisco comes out and just has a very anemic offense for a month and a half longer, then everybody's good. The weather's cold, but that grace period.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe Pat Burrell is the first to go out of anybody in this division.
Yeah.
Something like that is definitely feasible.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But then
But
there's the Rockies.
yeah, and then there are the Rockies, who are probably the most infuriating one out of this bunch when it comes to their current manager and GM situation.
Safe and
Because
safe.
yes, very safe because Bud Black has just a rolling year to year contract. But there is the thing, Kenneth, where the previous several years, a couple of years, he had signed an extension in spring training. It was a 1 year deal at least. But thanks, Patrick. Talking about those Expos, but Bud Black signs it.
Speaking Spanish, I think.
Bud Black signs it in spring training, but in 2024 that didn't happen. It wasn't until after the season. But from what it sounded like over the years, it's Bud Black's job until he doesn't want it anymore. It's kind of what's been the messaging from the Rockies and like owner Dick Monfort, who was really wanting to sign him to a contract extension. That's I think the where it comes from. Where Bud Black's that seat is so cold you'd get frostbite sitting on it, as what it's
Yeah,
felt like quite a bit over the
you're not
years.
wrong. Yeah, and it's like you said. He gets to be the manager until he doesn't want to anymore. Really feels like the feeling. It's hard to see things going much worse than it has already in the past couple of years for the Rockies, and none of this is the conversation. It's saying it's Bud Black's fault. This team has been so bad. I think there's some things where he hasn't helped his case, but overall, this
Mm-hmm.
hasn't been a very talented organization in the past couple of seasons. So, um, I think with Bud Black, he's not a younger manager. He's one of the older managers out there, and so I wonder how much longer he keeps on wanting to do it. And then there's a lot of losing. I think that the pride might come into it at some point where he has the pride of wanting to see this through. This is the first manager to have back-to-back playoff appearances in Rockies history, and I think that bought him a lot of leash from the get-go. And I think that he has a lot of say in this organization too. So all of that really points to him maybe even moving from the bench into a front office role, and that would be the change. With that, I think it's a very easy, or well, it's a secret that everybody knows that Warren Schaefer is kind of that next in line when it comes to Rockies managerial hierarchy, and they love promoting from within. So he's the third base coach there. For anybody that is interested in it, that's the name to keep an eye on. But if anything catastrophic were to happen, Bud Black steps away or gets fired somehow, Mike Redmond is the bench coach. That's always been that backup behind. So they have some stuff in place, but this structure of this organization is just so static and stuck in the mud with Bud Black being in the position he is and Bill Schmidt with where he is that it's hard to envision any moves or changes happening anytime soon because they have no interest in doing otherwise.
Yeah, no, and I think it comes to like Dick Monfort. No, those 2017, 2018 seasons have bought Bud Black just unlimited grace there with the big league team, where they feel him. He's the pitching whisperer. He's the wise sage that they need. And well, he's not a bad manager. It's been a lot of those times. Is he the right manager for the Rockies and where they're at right now? And no, he's talked about a lot of things, but the things that have held the Rockies back over these last couple of years is his maybe desire to focus on winning ball games more so, which is good, but it's also just not helping the process where, hey, this rookie young player needs playing time. Why is Jake Cave out there in right field every single day? Things like that of a lot of these veterans getting playing time. So we know his tendencies. He likes veteran players more so. Uh, Pitching whisper, it's always been keep the ball down in the zone and throw fastballs at the knees, that type of thing. Old school 80s pitching mentality. But you just can't really see what would put him on the hot seat. And now maybe 2025 is his final year, and they're like, okay, he's there. We've got our young core in place now, part of our rebuild, but we need a new voice to help lead the crew. There was that article from Patrick Saunders where a couple of players anonymously said, like, yeah, maybe it wouldn't be bad to have a voice in the clubhouse to lead the team. So
Yeah,
there is those tones around the team, but really it's the main guy signing the checks at the very top. That's Bud Black's my man.
yeah, and I think, he was the right time or the right guy for the
Yeah.
job at the time of taking it. The problem is you have 6 years of just smelly losing seasons since then, and that's all that's accumulated. And also you have kind of the changing of the guard, the changing of the cores. There's no longer Story, Arenado, LeMahieu, Marquez, and since Marquez is on the final year of his deal. So I think that the natural progression is when this becomes Zach Veen and Chase Dollander's team, and Nolan Jones and Brenton Doyle and Tovar are, mid-20s, late 20s guys. Bud Black's not going to be around anymore. I think when that time comes. Is that this year? Is that 2026? Maybe into 2027? I don't see him going past the next 3 years. I'll definitely say it that way. And maybe continue into his 70s. But the weird thing with the Rockies is you can't count it out. They could lose 95 plus over the next 3 years, and it is not hard to imagine that we're still having the same conversation where it's Schmidt and Bud Black running the show. So it is absolutely possible. It's depressing to say that, but everybody knows that that's the reality of the situation.
Yeah, you just never know because even though a change can always be beneficial, it's and sometimes the head has to roll and you have to fire a manager. Just sometimes that. But
And you can't fire the owner, and that's
yeah,
kind of where the Rockies are at, though.
yeah, the Rockies haven't fired a manager since Clint Hurdle
Sounds about right.
because Jim Tracy
If
had
you
a handshake deal. He
yeah.
resigned. They signed Walter Weiss. Walt Weiss, he resigned, and
Hmm.
so they just wait for them
Even
to leave, I guess.
Yeah, I guess if you want to, I mean, Dan O'Dowd was ready to re-sign, and
He
they
resigned.
they were ready to re-sign Dan O'Dowd, and then he ended up, the only one that I guess has kind of gotten the axe was Jeff Bridich, and even then that was a ceremonial agree
Mutually
to
agreed.
part ways. So they're not keen on firing people either. That's another problem with the Rockies.
Yeah, well, got to be sentimental. But that speaks to the other guy part of this equation, the general manager Bill Schmidt. Uh, the team does not have a president of baseball ops, which is something like Patrick Saunders of the Denver Post has said time and time again. Yeah, the team probably needs one of those uh, to just break it up and get Dick Monfort a little further out of the conversations of team free agency and team decisions with the
Well, so
roster. But
for anybody who listens to this that isn't a Rockies follower, Greg Fiesel is their president of baseball operations, but
he's
Greg
just a
Fiesel's
just the team president. He's not
yeah.
baseball ops. It's just team president
I
over
thought,
business stuff.
oh no, he oversees both baseball and business
Yeah,
operations. That's the thing. He has a dual role. So like, I get that nomenclature does exist somewhere in the staff directory. The problem
yeah,
is it goes to a former football player that was also an exec at
yeah,
Coca-Cola. That's the way the Rockies do business. So anybody that really, wants to put their finger on what's wrong with Colorado, that's a pretty good place to start to find the pulse. Is just those decisions. Nothing against Fiesel necessarily, but it's very clear that this is not the Andrew Friedman caliber hire to get an organization
yeah,
into the hump and into a winning ways. Their motivations are much different.
yeah. So Greg Fiesel, president and chief operating officer. So he's just over the business stuff, baseball business aspect. He was on the Rockies spring training broadcast today, just hyping up, "Hey, Rockies TV's a thing. Here's our
Mhm.
promotions this season. Come get this food." So he's
Yay.
he's just over the ticketing and business stuff. Nothing with roster construction, which is all on Bill Schmidt as the senior vice president and general manager. So, and he's considered a team officer. So we really don't know what his contract length is. It's just kind of a indefinite until he either gets fired or resigns,
Hmm.
which is kind of how the Rockies have operated with kind of the front office nowadays.
All of them. Yeah.
So like we couldn't tell you how long his contract is because the Rockies just consider him, well, he's a salaried employee. We'll just keep him until we're done with him.
Yeah. Schmidt is very well respected. I think, the same way we talked about it earlier. Um, I don't know how much or little to assign the blame or credit to Schmidt whenever the Rockies make a transaction. I'm very curious to know what is or is not a Bill Schmidt move, and it could be as big as is did he acquire Nolan Jones, but was he forced to sign Chris Bryant kind of thing? Like it's hard to grade any GM without knowing who's to
Yeah,
blame, some of the good and the bad. But also when it comes to the Rockies specifically, it makes it that much harder because they're already such a curious case of an organization, and you scratch your head and wonder what the hell are they doing most of the time.
Hmm.
Is it you're wondering what Bill Schmidt's doing, or are you wondering what Monfort or Bud Black or the whole hive mind? So it always just kind of feels like an incomplete grade a little bit with Schmidt.
Yeah, yeah, and you can see definitely those hints of Bill Schmidt. Like, there's some things with his history as scout, some good moves and things he wants to do. Like, you can see he wants to push that team into our young, developed guys that were prospects we need to focus on developing and whatnot. But then there's also those other moves, like you're saying, of okay, was this him and is it not great, or was he forced
Yeah,
to do this and it's still not great? But
and
either way,
we talk about the Dodgers being a well-oiled machine. It's I don't know if I believe this or not, but there is a very distinct possibility that the Rockies are operating right now with their GM trying to accumulate as much young talent and force his manager to play those young players.
yeah,
And the manager is dragging his feet and doing so begrudgingly, if at all. That's not good. That's so horrible if that's the way that a Major League Baseball um, team and is being structured and run the entire way through. And it's just not hard to believe that that's actually the case. And it
mm-hmm.
really might be. And if that's so, then everybody who goes onto Twitter and calls the Rockies a clown franchise, they're right. Like they're right. And so it's you just don't know about the Rockies. That's the weird part about this whole episode.
Yeah. My joke is that I think the Rockies saw the movie Moneyball like one time, and then they just live out those things. So like Bill Schmidt, he wants to force his manager to use these certain players, but the manager's dragging his feet. And so that or the scene where the manager in Moneyball comes up to Brad Pitt and he's like, "It's hard to do what I do under a 1 year contract." And so then that's why Dick Monfort would always give him those extensions in spring training, so he doesn't have the hanging 1 year contract
Yeah,
hanging over
and
him.
really ask yourself as a baseball fan, how many other franchises are doing this rolling 1 year contract thing? Just with anybody, with a player, with a front office, with the manager, whoever it is. There's very few and far between. But then you see the Rockies, and they're doing it with kind of everybody in their management structure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it's a joke. Just looking at it's hard to say, but it's hard to take them seriously right now because I'm
Yeah,
not quite sure what they're doing.
because when they do fire like this off season, they fired one of their assistant hitting coaches with their reasoning there are too many cooks in the kitchen. We need to simplify the chain of communication, and then they fired their bullpen coach Reed Cornelius, and or they relieved him, and that was it. Even though their
The-
main pitching coach hasn't had much success since he was a bullpen coach, and
I'm
who knows, their
gonna
hitting's still a mess. So
yeah.
there's more heads that could roll, but there's not many changes in the guard, and it's usually
All right.
players just need to play better.
I have a really good obscure reference to make that pretty well epitomizes the Rocky situation. So in the third major league movie called Back to the Minors, which like six people have seen, it has Scott Bakula in it. It's terrible. Um,
I don't
but
recall he leaped into a manager.
Yeah, it also has Walter Goggins, and
Mm-hmm.
he's downtown like Brown or something like that. Yeah, he doesn't play like the most believable hitter, but dude crushes his minor league prospect.
Yeah.
Regardless, the Twins suck, and they have to get back to the Oakland Ballers versus the San Jose Giants. They have the Salt Lake City Buzz, the AAA team, play the major league team. And the major league manager the whole time is just delusional, saying we're just one left-handed pitcher away from being successful. One left-handed reliever. That's all I need to turn this team around. And they look over to like, you're absolutely delusional if you think that's all you are. That's kind of the way the Rockies have been the whole time. Is they're always just one left-handed reliever away from being right there with everybody else. When in actuality, that's just the mental gymnastics that they're jumping through.
Yeah.
That's the best way to describe the Rockies. Is a movie that basically nobody remembers or had watched.
I've seen it, and it's not good. Why is
All
why is Pedro Serrano all of a sudden down in AAA?
right. And it's also the neighbor from Married with Children. So good to see him. He's still working.
But yeah, the main thing is like we were saying. There's really doesn't feel like there's much of a hot seat in Colorado because there's just so much loyalty, and part of that's a lack of accountability of just trying to shake up the guard a bit, which is really rough. And so who knows? But before we close out here, ultimately, Kenneth, of all of these teams, if you had to pick somebody who has the hottest seat, who would you pick?
San Diego is the answer. But I do like the idea of the Diamondbacks raising their expectations and Torey Lovello having to meet it. That is, I do like that idea a little bit, just because that's Arizona, trending upwards.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I think that's the same thing in here, or Pals here, Blake Street Banner, pointing out your other major league alumni that showed up in that third movie in the minors with the Salt Lake Buzz. Rube, the catcher, Roger Dorn. He was one of the own. Was he like the owner or the? He I did never.
Dorn was the owner of the Twins at that point, so that was his role in it.
Yeah,
And
so
then
he
Tanaka,
sold the Indians and then bought the
no,
Twins.
Dorn was a player with the Indians, so
But
he was the
he
third.
became the general manager in the second movie,
Yeah, and then
and
he
then
became
sold
the
his
owner.
majority and became a player back
I
again.
want to see. I want to see the movie that is Roger Roger Dorn hanging out with his financial advisor throughout his playing career, because that guy cleared he accomplished a lot off the field in those movies.
Absolutely.
But yeah, Tanaka and Serrano with the Mabos. Yeah,
Oh, yeah, and
I actually kind of adore that movie just for how stupid and silly of a baseball
Bob
movie it is.
Euchre was
Mhm.
demoted down to AAA to be. No, he does show up. Yeah, he was the AAA
He
broadcaster for the
was.
Buzz. What the heck was going on in that movie? What happened to these guys' careers? Oh my goodness.
My favorite joke, my favorite running joke in that movie, though, was they had a radar gun that they bought secondhand from the police department, and it didn't clock speeds under 50 miles an hour. And they had a pitcher named Doc who was so
Yeah.
crazy that the radar gun wouldn't pick it up.
You want to see my fastball, coach? Yeah. Oh,
All right,
goodness. Weird movie. But
let's
on
wrap
that note, we'll close things out here on Best of the West. Appreciate you tuning in. Kenneth, where can the folks find you?
You'll find me over at KDeb1988 on Twitter, and then I'll also be over at Purple Row.
Right on. You can find me over at Purple Row as well. Writing Wednesday Rock Piles. Follow me on Twitter at Skylar Timmons. Also on Blue Sky, stimmons13.bsky.social. And find me over at Rocky Mountain Rooftop, also talking Rockies baseball every week. Plenty of references over there as well for jokes and movies. But I wonder why John Warren never directed another movie after Major League 3. But
Career
appreciate
killer, man.
Call Me Astro, Norm, uh, Isaac, all the other guys hopping in here in the chat and joining us here this evening. And until next time, this has been Best of the West. And remember, the best is yet to come.